Oh, I'm spilling water everywhere. Oops, sorry. I call this meeting to order for Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Susan Payne.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dusty Wright.
Here.
Commissioner Sharon McDonald.
Here.
Commissioner Josh Reardon.
Here.
Commissioner Stephen Burnett.
Here.
Commissioner Carr Melton.
Here.
Commissioner Nick Paul.
Here.
Acting City Manager Stephanie Hernandez.
Here.
City Attorney Ashley Smith.
Here.
The clerk is present. Madam Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Rachel. We are going to begin with our invocation given by Elder LaTanya Boyce of the Christian Joy Center, and then the pledge led by Commissioner Reardon.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for being here.
Let us pray. Father God, we praise you and thank you for this day. We thank you for the shower that our land truly needed, that water, Father God. And we come and we thank you for everything that goes forth today, Father God, in our lives, and that now as we've come together, assembled together, Lord, to make decisions. And you said if we need wisdom to ask of it from you, Father God, and you would give it to us. So I thank you for wisdom for these 7 men and women, Father God, that will hear you and do what we need for our city. We're giving you all the glory and honor, that you alone are worthy to be praised. And we just follow your lead in everything you have. We're thanking you for all of the people that are here representing our city, Father God, and various departments in that, and that you will continue to be with them and each of us as we leave out. So we give you praise and glory in his name, in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Please follow me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you for that. We are going to move on to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
A motion from Commissioner Burnett. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner McDonald. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and motion passes 7-0. We're going to begin tonight with a presentation and a discussion on open government, transparency, and ethics for city commissions. And I'm sorry, did you say Gino? Gino. Okay, I just want to make sure I say that right. Gino Zamora, through the NMSIF Agency Assist Program, will give us some information on that or present on that. So thank you for being here. I know
Okay.
you came a long way to do this, so thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Payne, Pro Tem Wright, commissioners, and also to City Manager Hernandez and City Attorney Ashley Smith. I'm here as part of a new program that's offered through the New Mexico Self-Insured Fund, which is the program that insures all of our municipalities statewide in what's called an agency assist program. And that is where the Self-Insured Fund will assist me to meet with city commissions, city councils throughout the state, town councils, village councils throughout the state, to assist them to just refresh everyone's memory, assist with legal compliance, and there are some hot topics that a lot of cities face, and Alamogordo is not unique when it faces some governance issues. And so working with City Attorney Ashley Smith and working with Acting City Manager Hernandez, and also in some ways at the direction of Mayor Payne. I'm here to provide this presentation on open government transparency and ethics for municipalities. Just a little bit of a background for myself. My name is Gino Zamora. I'm with Ortiz and Zamora law firm in Santa Fe. We represent cities, school districts, and state agencies throughout the state. It's nice to be back in Alamogordo. We represent NMSBVI. In the past, we've had we currently represent NMSBVI, but in the past, we've also represented the school district locally. We assisted them about 4 years ago when the Air Force was considering bringing more airmen and airwomen to Alamogordo. So we helped them with what was called a community campaign. So again, it's nice to be back and working with you, working with the community. The laws we're going to review this evening are the New Mexico Open Meetings Act and compliance with the Open Meetings Act. This presentation is geared really for the commission and the commissioners, but also it is very important that both the staff and the public understand some of the restrictions and limitations on commissioners. And we'll talk about that as we go through. In addition, feel free to ask questions as we go along. And I want to make sure that the commission always feels free to stop me, ask for clarification or questions. So Open Meetings Act, the Inspection of Public Records Act, the New Mexico Governmental Conduct Act, which really is the statewide ethics statute that is now applicable to local governments. It's about five years or so that the New Mexico Governmental Conduct Act was amended to apply not only to state agencies but to local governments. So cities and school districts now are subject to the Conduct Act. And a very brief review of your code of conduct that's in ordinance, just to show some of the consistencies and how it overlaps with the Governmental Conduct Act. A bit of a refresher there. And a reminder to the whole community that's participating in this meeting. I did take time to review your Open Meetings Act practices. I think you're doing very, very well on the Open Meetings Act practices, but especially for staff, the reason why things can be so militant about you've got to get your agenda items in, you got to get your documents in, that's because by law, meeting notices and agendas are required to be published 72 hours in advance. If you miss that deadline, a few things happen. In some instances, meetings have to be postponed or canceled. In other instances, your item's just not going to make the agenda and it's not going to get voted upon by the commission. So there are no amendments within 72 hours, meaning you can't add anything within 72 hours. Your publication and your 72-hour deadline includes your website. So if it's at 71 hours published on the website, you're going to run into trouble because you're not meeting the 72-hour deadline. And that's three days, but it's hour to hour. So if you publish at 5 on a Friday, you can't meet until after 5 on a Monday. So again, that's why deadlines are so important and why clerks and administrators get really tough about that. If you miss that 72-hour deadline, you're only allowed to call an emergency meeting, and that's calling a meeting and publishing an agenda within 72 hours. Anything within that 72-hour period would be considered an emergency meeting. In the last 10 years, with all the governing entities that we've worked with, which is probably over 40 at this point, we've had 2 instances that have met the standard for emergency meetings. And that is unforeseen circumstances that will likely result in injury or damage to persons or property or substantial financial loss. It's not because we missed a deadline and we're not able to sign a contract. It's not because we forgot to include it on the agenda. It's a high threshold that is so high you are required to submit your agenda to the Attorney General's office within 10 days for their review. And the risk on that is that after 10 days, and maybe it takes them a few days longer than that, 15 days or 20 days, they can say that wasn't a legitimate meeting, which means it didn't occur, and you've unrolled and unraveled everything. So I advise, rather than an emergency meeting, which is such a high threshold, that you call a special meeting. And the special meeting requires 72 hours notice, and you're able to meet within 3 days and get the work done. Now, granted, like I've mentioned, there were 2 highly emergent issues that were legitimate. The AG's office reviewed and approved, and it was substantial danger. Electrical issues involving water, involving kids, et cetera, that occurred. And severe freezes up north that busted water pipes, gas pipes, et cetera. I include this 2015 bill just as an example of a proposed mandatory public comment period. I've reviewed your agenda, and I think you do very well on the public comment periods. I would, there's an underlying theme that you'll hear me talking about, which is treat everybody the same. And so there are tweaks that I am going to recommend. But just looking at this bill, which is representative of some of the things that we want to keep in mind, it allowed for either a general period for public comment or during specific agenda items. And I know for municipalities, you're going to have different guidelines, like ordinances may bring in public comment specific to an ordinance. But you've got that flexibility to determine as a governing body where you place those. The theme is allow reasonable amount of time and diverse perspectives. Of course, when it comes to public comment period, the commission can't pick and choose who speaks on what topic, which is, we'll only take comments that favor our initiative and no comments that disfavor our initiative. You can't pick and choose between the subject matter and whether they favor you or don't. And some things I will talk later about the use of a script to introduce public comment. I'm not sure if you use a script at all to introduce that.
Not really.
Some governing entities, governing bodies use that, especially if they're running into issues of people coming in and disclosing confidential personnel information. If they're being a little unruly, some of the script is to speak, to take into consideration other people, other perspectives, to maintain confidences, to use the chain of command, et cetera. So I'll talk more about that later, but I just want to be aware that there's some general concepts out there. So when does the Open Meetings Act apply? All meetings with a quorum of members. And so you are a 7-member commission. My first grade math skills are working. I was able to count that out quickly. You're a 7-member commission. And so, I say it this way: whenever 4 or more of you gather in the governing body's name, you're acting as the governing body. And so you have to be highly sensitive to that because there are members of the public who will always be watching that when 4 are together. And that doesn't mean physically in this room. There's what's called a rolling quorum, and a lot of commissions have problems with this. There's an old term that we used to do, we used to all use, and forgive me, I didn't give my full background. I'm a former city attorney of Santa Fe for 4 years, former chief counsel to a governor, former assistant attorney general for the state. Seen these issues back and forth. And I've now in my 29th year of practicing law. And I started out as an assistant attorney general. So these issues I've been working with for almost 30 years. I've seen all the examples. I've seen things that work really well, and I've seen things that don't work really well. And there used to be a term called counting votes, where where, okay, I met with this person, this person, this person, and this person. I met with them separately, but I met with them individually to count the votes and make sure I've got support for my initiative. That is what's now called a rolling quorum, and the AG's office says that's the equivalent of a meeting. If you've met with more than 4 members, or more than 3 members, once you meet with that, 3 members are okay, but the 4th member is not. And so those types of meetings can be in person in the chambers, they can be in person outside the chambers, they can be by email, by text, and by video conference now, by Zoom. So you've got to be very careful about that. The biggest question that comes up is, well, what about events? We've got a ribbon cutting at the supermarket next week. Can 4 of us be present? The best practice, and you'll see when I get to the best practices, the best practice is to send a notification to the public. There's a particular event, we've got a ribbon cutting, we've got a barbecue, we've got a staff recognition barbecue, something of that sort. And what we recommend is you issue a notice that just says, hey, notice of potential quorum, this particular event, there's a forum somewhere, there's a Chamber of Commerce luncheon, and a quorum may be present, but we're not meeting, we're not taking action during this event. What it does insulate the commission from is accusations that something is happening. For our school boards, it always comes up when a majority of a school board is hanging out together at a basketball game. They're off in the corner talking, and then suddenly there's a complaint to the AG's office that the business of the school district was taking place. And there are parallel examples with city commissions, et cetera. So for a lot of governing bodies, that can be an issue. No rolling quorums, again, in person, by email, by text, by video conference, et cetera. And I use that up there. And why is that? And that's because the open meeting and the concepts, the theory behind the open meeting and the purpose of the Open Meetings Act is that the public's entitled to the greatest possible information regarding the official acts of officers and employees. So public policy is to be formulated right here in the commission chambers. Mm-hmm. And all persons should be permitted to attend and listen. And so that's why streaming occurred during COVID, and that's why there's accommodation notices if someone is hearing impaired and needs translation, et cetera. And that's for these concepts, these general concepts, that the business is to take place in public, not in the smoky back rooms, as they used to say, and that the public should have the maximum opportunity to listen and observe. So I made that statement about the big, broad concept of everything must occur in public. At the same time, the Open Meetings Act gives you very limited circumstances in which you can go into executive session. And I list this here for you, because there are certain things that really shouldn't be talked about in public. If you're talking about confidential personnel matters, can you imagine if we were going through personnel files in public meetings with video cast across the country? So limited personnel matters of any public employee, you have the ability to go into executive session to discuss those. Collective bargaining, I'm not sure, do you have collective bargaining agreements here with the city? You have that opportunity to discuss collective bargaining strategy and negotiations in executive session. You're going to see a theme on the transactional stuff, like collective bargaining or competitive sealed proposals or attorney-client privilege or purchase and sale of property and water rights. It'd be pretty silly if in open session we said, to tell the landowner we can only pay $30,000, but we have up to $50,000 in our budget to buy it if we have to. well, the negotiations are gone at that point in time. And it's the same for collective bargaining. It's the same for competitive sealed proposals. And of course, attorney-client privilege discussions shouldn't be occurring out in public. They're no longer privileged if you do that. And I'm not talking about asking advice about procedure or interpretation of an ordinance when you're in open session, but really when you're thinking about pending and threatened litigation, you have that ability to have that discussion in closed session. The one thing that I want to tell you with that is you need to have in that session on attorney-client privilege discussions, the attorney either needs to be present or you need to be reviewing a memo or some type of guidance from the attorney. There is an AG's opinion out there that said if your attorney's not involved and you're not talking about attorney-client privilege communications, then you're misusing that exception. Now there's something that I talk about called placeholders that a lot of governmental entities will do. They'll just publish several executive session items week in and week out. Every single meeting, the same executive session items are on there. AG is really the AG's office for years has been cracking down on that. Placeholders aren't appropriate. When you place an executive session on the agenda 72 hours or more in advance, it is for a known and particular purpose, and you do have to describe it with reasonable specificity. So you can't have a limited personnel matter placeholder in case something comes up on a Tuesday evening to talk about it. It really has to be intentional and known prior to being placed on the agenda, and it has to be described reasonably specific. That gets hard with personnel matters. You're not going to put an employee's name on there, but it's got to be clear that it's a particular individual or individuals. You can't take budgetary staff salaries in or RIFs broadly, reductions in force broadly in. They've got to be identifiable individuals.
So I have a couple of questions for you real quick.
Sure.
So
Thank you, Mayor.
going back to the quorum,
Please.
you know, we live in a very small town. And I hear what you're saying, I just don't know how we could conceive of so do you see where I'm going with that?
Yes.
Because I can't tell you how many times I walked into a room and went, I had no idea all these commissioners, because it was truly innocent. I mean, we all happen to be involved in the same kind of things, and because we live in a small town, that's not that uncommon. So I think for most of us, what we try to do is just sort of separate from each other. I always joke around and find somebody else and say, you're my witness, I'm not talking city business, or, whatever. But we don't necessarily have to leave, right? Like, we just...
So
the premise behind it is as long as you're not talking city business, right?
Right.
Okay.
So long as you're not talking city business, developing policy, making decisions, et cetera. So you raise a very important point, especially in smaller communities. May you just run into each other someplace? Yeah, that's going to happen. That could be.
Yeah, there could literally be four of us that walk into the same store at different times and happen. That's just not uncommon at all.
It's not the unintentional running into each other that's that I advise to notice, right? You're not going to each week publish a potential quorum at the grocery store on Sundays because everyone just happens to do it then, or church on Sunday if four happen to go to the same church. But what I am advising, there are known events that are city events or other community events. Using Chamber of Commerce as an example, a luncheon, something of that sort, using public forums, maybe other civic events, like I talked about, a barbecue or some recognition or a ribbon cutting. There are things that you know in advance where four or more may be present. Those are the instances that I would recommend. Just just posting.
Yeah.
It's onerous on staff, it's tough on staff, but just posting for those known events. The reason I talk about this, and the reason I talk about all of this, is because Attorney General complaints are expensive. And the expense is paid by the city. So if someone is making a complaint for some type of violation, I will tell you, there's an example that I have later here. Back during COVID and video meetings, on a board of, a governing body of 5, 3 just stood up on the rostrum chatting about the day. You know, how's your kid doing? How was the game? How was all of this? And somebody watching on the internet saw 3 people talking during a break, a quorum, a majority of that board, and they reported it to the AG's office. And then the attorneys have to get involved. And then they have to investigate and write a report and wait for the AG's office to respond. And that gets expensive. And so being mindful of all of this and avoiding all of this also saves the expense.
Yeah, and I think that we are. Okay, so my other question is about executive session and posting a notice.
Yes.
I know you said you have to meet for there's like limited specific things you can meet for.
Right.
But in terms of posting the executive session,
Right.
should it be more specific? Can it be, and I'm really not thinking of our particular commission because I think we're actually really good about it. But I am thinking of another board.
Sure.
No, it's not the county, but it's another board. And I'm just wondering how specific you have to be when you're posting the notice of executive session.
Sure. It's going to be situational. Let me get back on that slide. So with attorney-client privilege discussions, when it relates to a specific lawsuit, I recommend listing the lawsuit. You just list the name and the case number. That you don't get much more specific than that, right? When it relates to personnel, I'll give you examples. Some are discussion of evaluation of city manager, discussion of contract negotiations regarding a city manager. I'm just using city manager as an example. The executive typically comes up in that. So evaluations, assignments, certain assignments can go in there. Duties, scope of duties, all of that. When you think about how you manage and evaluate an employee, a lot of that can be done in there. Now, obviously, there are disciplinary issues that would be in there for any employee throughout the city. And so the reasonable specificity, when it's someone with a title like a city manager or a city attorney, you may actually use that title. When you start moving through the employees, it may be a public works employee or a clerk's office employee, something of that sort. Specific enough that if the AG reads it and the public reads it, we know it's an individual, it's not broad, it's not employees generally, but it's not so
would say
specific
something
that you
like,
know exactly who it is.
Okay, so you would say something like public works employee or so just be, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
With school
Okay.
districts, I've said regarding a coach. Which coach, we're not going to narrow it down that much. But it's not an exact science. What I can tell you is when we've used a city employee, the AG's office has come back and said that's not specific enough.
Oh,
Yeah. I have a letter from the AG's office for a governing body that said, when you said limited personnel matters for a city employee, actually in this instance it was a school district employee, that wasn't sufficient. We came back and republished with a coach, and that was sufficient. Sometimes it's hit or miss. I can't give you exact answers all the time, but what I can tell you is err on specificity.
Okay.
move towards specificity, and you're going to hear that
Interesting.
throughout. Okay, any other questions on the topic so far? Great. So, on your meeting notices, again, I've talked about reasonable specificity. I reviewed your agenda for this evening. You do a really good job. The more words there are, the more specific it is. I think your descriptions are pretty thorough. I have seen governing body agendas that say approval of contracts. And that's it. That's all they say. What contracts? To whom? All of those things. So by lining them out, approval of food service contract, approval of paving contracts, and then beyond that with a little bit more specificity. You do a really good job on that. So I think you're in really good shape with your reasonable specificity. But know, and this is for staff too, when there's a description asked for, it's because we need to comply and provide enough specificity that a member of the public reading your agenda is knowing what you're meeting about and what you're deciding. I've seen governing bodies intentionally play games by getting very vague and very short so that the public really doesn't see, because it might be controversial. And I don't want the public to get worked up about this. I'm just going to keep it vague. It's actually the opposite under the statute. Be as specific as possible. A reminder, and I think you also do a good job of this, you've got to keep written minutes of all meetings. It's not required to be verbatim. Governing bodies may choose verbatim or sections that are verbatim, but summary minutes are sufficient. By statute, you need to have the date, time, place of meetings, names of members in attendance and those absent, the substance of the proposals considered, and a record of votes. So those are the bare minimums. One thing that's not that aware, and again, if you've got members of the public that are looking to trip you up as frequently as possible, be aware that the first draft of the minutes are to be prepared within 10 days of your meetings. They can be marked draft because the body's not going to come back and see them for maybe 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and then they're not going to be approved. But someone can ask for a copy of the minutes on day 10 or day 11, and technically the law requires having that draft ready. So stamping a draft, putting the watermark draft can be very helpful, knowing that that a commission member can come back and say, oh, you misheard what I said, please correct this language, or I voted in favor, not opposed. Remember that with the Open Meetings Act, it's the Attorney General or a district attorney and individuals. Members of the public can enforce the Open Meetings Act, filing claims. Intentional actions can be misdemeanors, and we've had that happen with communities in New Mexico. There can be fines, and you can end up paying attorney's fees and costs. So it can get expensive quickly. The first expense is responding to an Attorney General's complaint. I typically ballpark that as you're starting at about $5,000 for each complaint that comes in, and that's why you want to watch yourselves to minimize the complaints that are out there. Okay, so recent issues. We've talked about vague agenda items, executive session placeholders. We talked about that also. Discussions during a meeting recess, be mindful that it's not for review. I talked about that example. Meeting requirements we just covered. Enforcement of the public comment rules. I'm going to go back to this, that the baseline of public comment is everybody must be treated the same. I do, and I understand that the board has business to do each day, and that, or each meeting, and that you need to get to that business for the good of the public, the employees who are here. I advise against a total time limit. I did see that on the agenda of no more than 21 minutes. I do advise that the chair of the meeting, the mayor or the pro tem in the mayor's absence, has the discretion to shorten the amount of minutes. So say the room is packed and 40 people want to speak, there's the opportunity, so long as you treat everyone the same, to maintain the discretion to say, standard is 3 minutes, but we may go down to 1 minute if necessary. But the risk, it's not clear legally, and I haven't seen an AG opinion on this. If you get to minute 21 and there are people that have not been heard, you are risking complaints in an AG opinion that you might be excluding perspectives. I'll come up with a hypothetical, but it's possible. I've been around enough city council and city commission meetings to see that people can play games on the other side as it relates to public comments. And so it's possible that someone could get here early, have 21 minutes worth of commenters on one very specific opinion, and leave no time for anyone else. If you get 3 minutes, that's 7 people.
So don't limit the number, don't limit the number of commenters, is what you're saying.
That's correct. I think you can have it, maintain the advanced sign up, make sure that people aren't sort of piling on, that they're when they come in, they're ready to comment, but limiting it to 21 minutes, which is theoretically 7 speakers, it has potential to be a problem.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What if we have a hot topic and for one particular meeting, because we don't want to limit the number of commenters, we just say, okay, you only get 2 minutes per person, but then we go to the next meeting
Right.
and we're back to 3 minutes. Is that okay?
It is, because
Okay.
in the meeting, you've utilized your discretion observing the room
Okay,
to say, oh, we have 40 people here.
okay.
We have a lot of business. There's some very important things to move on. Some people need to get back to their families, et cetera. We're going to shorten it, but you need to inform the public in your disclosure. Public comment, you have 3 minutes.
Right.
Standard is
And we
3
do
minutes.
that.
However, it may be adjusted downward based on the discretion of the chair. And so, but again, treat everybody equally. So everybody gets 1 minute, everyone gets 3 minutes, everyone gets 2 minutes, but also everyone gets heard.
Okay.
Quick
I was
comment
just
on that.
looking to see what our public sign-up said, but yeah.
I got a quick comment on that. Typically in the past, back in the day, I've been here a long time, so our public comment used to be at the end of the meeting, and then it was unlimited. You could sit here and read the Wall Street Journal all night long if you wanted to. The meetings were dragging out, so we moved it to this, and what we've typically done is we allow the 7 people at the beginning of the meeting, and if we have an excessive amount, then at the very end of the meeting, we'll allow them to continue so that we can get staff and everybody and the business taken care of. I don't know if that's legal or not, but that's how we used to do it back when this kind of changed, because like say used to, you'd have people sit here the whole meeting, and sometimes the meetings would go to 12, 1 in the morning, just so they could speak at public comment.
So I'm not going to give you a hard and fast rule, Commissioner and Mayor, Commissioner. There isn't a hard and fast rule here. Some of these are just simply best practices. And much of it is based on the complaints I've seen go through the AG's office or the potential for complaints. And I have seen public comment complaints go to the AG's office. The general rule is treat everyone the same. I think the risk of splitting it is if people are making comments prior to your vote on an agenda item and their voice isn't heard prior to that vote, that can be problematic. I've had governing bodies consider whether it's at the end, and they just go on and let it go on. But all the action, the whole reason they were here, all that action took place prior to that comment. So it's a balance. I think you're going to know when you have a controversial item on there, and you should plan accordingly, either with the placement or moving up certain staff items so that staff can get their decisions made and get out, and the controversial item, a controversial new ordinance or contract or something can be beyond the public comments. I'm not familiar with whether or not you have governing body rules. Some governing bodies will have rules that dictate the order of the agenda. I don't know if you have that, but be mindful of that also. I think where anyone would get caught up is if it's intentionally used in a purpose to subvert public input.
Yeah,
And I don't attribute that to you. I think the governing bodies are always trying to do the best thing.
Yeah, typically, if we have a hot topic item where there's 15 people that want to speak, they'll actually put the item number down that they want to speak on.
Oh, nice.
And then a lot of times we give them even additional time if they're speaking on the item. You know, usually the ones that we get signed up that come in the beginning and sign up usually are complaining about a park or complaining about this pothole in the street, and those are the ones we typically limit to the 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. If you're here to speak on a specific item, you sign up on that item, and then when that item comes up, we allow them to speak, so.
Thank you for that background and that distinction.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of whether or not you allowed
Yeah.
public comment on particular items.
Yeah, usually the
Some
mayor
governing
will
bodies
ask
don't.
too.
Yeah, that's how we have our sign-up sheet.
No, very good. Okay.
Do you have any more questions?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so, and you may talk about this later, but I'm really big on decorum and not letting people just come in here all willy-nilly and yell at us, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like if you don't have something constructive to say, if it's just here to like scream at us and call us names or whatever, we don't really have that very often. Used to, back in the day, but not very often. And, but I'm also big on free speech. So it's always a balancing act. But the 3-minute rule, I'm pretty hard and fast with that. Sometimes let them go over. So is there anything we should know with that?
So again, the theme is treat everyone equally. If your public comment period is independent from the agenda item comments, my advice would be to keep that consistent for every speaker, because there will be that person that comes in to yell. And again, you don't get to select people's speech and say, you can only say positive things about us and not negative things, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, and I don't care about that part.
Yeah.
I care about their delivery.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's decorum.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for a script is to address decorum, to say, here are the ground rules. You're going to have 3 minutes. Or if you've adjusted it because a room's big, you're going to have 1 minute. People, speak reasonably. I'm summarizing. There's really good language that we've prepared, but it's not coming to my mind right now. But it's essentially speak reasonably, understand that there may be other perspectives, maintain appropriate decorum, and so they can politely say, I don't like you, I don't like what you decided, I don't like this issue. But they've got to remain within decorum, and you have the opportunity to gavel them down. But it's reading that script that sets the tone for all of it, so that they know it before they get in, which is a little bit differently than someone getting animated and saying, okay, you're done. You've advised them in advance, these are the parameters, please don't speak about personnel matters, confidential personnel matters, et cetera. Then it gives you that much more authority to then say, no, you're out of order in this. And these scripts typically take about 15 seconds.
Yeah, I think the school board has a script like that. I have my opinions on it, but anyway,
Sure.
that's
It's
okay.
something to consider, and it's something
Right.
we advise.
Totally get it.
Because you can go through waves of folks that they're out of line.
Right.
And I do advise governing bodies this. There are times that they'll say, that person, they don't have anything productive to say. That is where the time limits and the consistency comes in. If someone else got 6 minutes and now they're limited to 3, you risk a complaint. But the other thing I advise is it's 3 minutes. It's
Right,
going to
and-
start, it's going to end, and they're going to move on.
Okay, and then my last question is, and I'm assuming we're correct in this, they have to sign up to speak.
You have that ability
Okay.
to dictate that.
Okay,
Because that bill that I showed that was proposed is not passed, you define the parameters of public comment. So advanced sign-up is not something unusual. A lot of school districts have that also. Other municipalities have that. The advanced sign-up at the beginning of the meeting, or 24, some have done 24 hours in advance, but you want to make sure that it's easy to do so,
Okay.
that it's not preventing speech.
there's nothing that makes me crazier than have somebody shout from the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
They
call
have to sign
for,
up, right.
some I've seen must be signed up prior to 6:30. At 6:30.
Right,
the
and that's
list
what we
is
do.
collected.
Yep, that's what we do. All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Things to avoid, other recent issues are properly posted meeting notices. So the website is one. I also recommend, here at City Hall, you've got the glass doors 72 hours in advance. Post the agendas facing outward, so a member of the public can see that 24/7. And there might also be other little, glass cases that you post them in also. Over-disclosure can be a rule. I've seen some cities that have it as part of their governing body rules that they will post it at every city facility. That's a lot, but you might actually specify which facilities, whether or not you're going to post them in rec centers or other things of that sort for the public to see. Again, not required. You will determine what your best practices are, but at the very least, I would say websites and at City Hall where the public can see it after hours. Tape to a glass door. I've talked about costly aspects. Do you, Mayor, Commissioners, do you still live stream at all your meetings? That's it's something that came up during COVID. I think it's still just a great practice. I think you found that a lot of families can't make it in the evening, yet they want to observe. I also think recording and posting is actually very helpful to the governing body. I'm not sure if anyone feels they've ever been misquoted, either in the public or in the media.
Maybe a few times.
Yeah, maybe once or twice. You have the
Or 100
ability
or 1,000
to,
or-
as the sportscasters say, point to the tape, right? So let's look at the tape. Let's go to this meeting, minute 42. Here's exactly what I said. Technically, the ability to meet virtually has been lifted, although the AG is sort of allowing that to continue as necessary till statutes can be updated regarding video conferences. But the general rule is that you're supposed to be present now. Okay, I think we've covered most all of this. I'm slightly behind in my timing, so I've got to speed up. Limit, use script,
Quick
limit
question on
time.
I got a quick question on that. You
Please.
said that about us being present. Occasionally, we'll have a commissioner that may be out of town, and they'll call in
Right.
and attend the meeting via telephone. Is that
So
legal?
So yes, the
Okay.
short answer is yes,
Okay.
under appropriate circumstances. So it's got to be unusual, it can't be regular,
Okay.
number one. Number two, Open Meetings Act allows for that so long as your annual Open Meetings Act resolution allows for telephonic attendance. So that's a little bit of a caveat, sort of looking towards.
That would be
towards
when
the city
we,
attorney.
when we approve our yearly, like we approve once a year, the meetings, the set meetings every year, it would need to be in that?
So, under the Open Meetings Act, you are required to adopt what's called an Open Meetings Act resolution annually. And I've got copies for city attorneys to work with and adapt it. But it's a resolution that says, here's how we comply with the Open Meetings Act. And it gives the general meeting schedule by saying, we meet second Tuesday and fourth Tuesday of every month.
Okay.
And then you'll have a separate list that's going to have the exact
Yeah, we
dates
do that, I think, in December of every year for the.
for the upcoming year. Yeah, it tends to be either the last resolution of the year before the start of a new year or the very first in January. Some do it on a fiscal year. I've covered no rolling quorums, conduct business as much in open session. Okay, that's Open Meetings Act. Anything before I move to IPRA? Any inspection of the Records Act? I'll speed up a little bit here. There's a lot less detail because really this is just an overview. The general rule is the public has a right to inspect public records except for limited exclusions. So for everyone's intents and purposes, just know that whatever you produce in your work with the city may be a public record and it may be subject to inspection. That includes emails, texts, pictures, videos, regular documents, drafts of documents, notes, etc., all that relate to city business. I once informed a city employee that handwritten notes may be subject to a public records inspection. That employee sort of freaked out, looked at me and said, "I'm never taking a note again in my life." And I said, just be balanced about that. You should take notes. You should have notes. You should remind yourself what needs to be done. Just be professional in those notes. Don't be writing, I dislike this person or this person stinks or whatever. Just be professional. So, but know when you're taking notes or writing emails or doing texts relating to city business or doing any of those on city equipment, that they may be subject to inspection. I'll give you an example of a personal phone that was used. There was someone that came into the front office of a college, actually, and was incredibly irate and abusive. And the secretary took out her personal phone and videotaped the individual. The person was there to conduct business, but they were very abusive in the way they were conducting business. Secretary took out her phone, videotaped how the person was acting. That person IPRA'd, that's the verb, IPRA'd a copy of that video. And we advised, yes, we produce it. You were acting in your capacity as a secretary. You were taking video of someone coming in to conduct business. Yes, it may have been on your personal phone, but it was part of your actions as an employee. And we produced that video. Now, at first, people may think, oh my goodness, what subject? I actually felt that was good and that was helpful, and we talked to that employee. You did the right thing by taking the video, and we've preserved the record of how the person acted, and if the person wants a copy of how they acted, they can see that.
Yeah.
And so it ended up being a good thing and not a bad thing, but we can have tough reactions. So be mindful. Again, I've been a city attorney. I've been a city employee. I've had to be mindful of my use of texts, videos, photographs, etc., and whether or not I was using a city-issued phone, city-issued laptop, etc., or whether I was using my own, my own phone. For the most part, I always used, I kept my phone personal, but knew that there may be things that I would have to turn over, subject to IPRA. Most most governmental entities have the email software that you can, and logins that you can use on a city-issued phone or a personal phone. I just always recommend using that email because when the search occurs, they don't actually have to come to your phone. They just go to the city system and obtain the emails that way. Let's see. So that's the right to inspect. I didn't get a chance to really look at the IPRA practices. With an in-house city attorney, you're in a much better circumstance to assist with IPRA request reviews. You tend to have a designated records custodian. I just have some top lines here. Know that IPRA is enforceable, again, through an AG, a district attorney, or through a private individual whose request has been denied. And we do, there are penalties of up to $100 per day plus costs and attorney's fees. So IPRA compliance has become very important because it's become a little bit of a cottage industry. More and more people are suing for errors, mistakes, improperly answered IPRA responses, and the damages can be high. We've got appellate decisions in the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court that your search must find all documents. If you didn't do a comprehensive enough search and you missed a group of documents, that can be problematic. This doesn't really apply, I don't think, for the city of Alamogordo, but just know that UNM had a private fundraising entity that was dedicated solely to UNM. That put the fundraising entity within the discretion, within the realm of IPRA requests, and that private entity had to provide information. That can happen actually with your contractors, and we've been working with city attorneys to update our contracts to say, you may have a responsibility to provide records that you maintain, private contractor, because you're maintaining them on behalf of us. So we've got some suggested language for updating your contracts to make the contractors aware, and also make them aware if they refuse to comply, because there are penalties and legal fees and all of that, that the contractors will indemnify the city for refusal to comply. Interesting on the ACLU versus Duran case, the requester actually already had the document in their possession, and the governmental agency didn't produce it, and then they went to the court and said, here's what the document looks like. We requested it, they didn't provide us, and the court awarded over $150,000 in damages for that. So we've seen $130,000 with the Secretary of State's office. Doña Ana County got hit for $90,000. Governor's office got hit for almost $400,000. These are all within about the last decade or so. So there's a trend. There's a trend to make a request, and there's a trend to exploit errors. And I don't think it's simply to exploit the error. It's reinforcing that the public has the right to public information. Right? Same thing we hope in OMA. So what do? We help our records custodians by providing them with the resources and staffing to ensure compliance. We provide training. We as an entity provide training to the records custodian and the IT department to ensure that record searches are complete, especially with emails, et cetera, documents on servers. It's not good enough to just ask the employees to turn over records. When we do this presentation simply to staff, staff's got 1,000 things on their plate. And I gotta go find records too. The bottom line is if you don't take the time to go search for the records, then there can be big judgments against the city, and that's problematic. So it's also about empowering, through the city manager, empowering the records custodian to carry a big stick, to say, when we send a records request, it needs to be answered, and here are the time frames. Because if we don't, the city's at risk, and the city can get sued. And we don't, the media might like when cities get sued, but the city doesn't like getting sued.
Right. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
As I'm still salty about this after all these years.
Yes, we all are.
Yeah, well, no, I didn't get in any trouble. I don't think it's right. But, okay, so first of all, two things I want to ask. I want to ask about redactions.
Sure.
And the other thing is I'm still a little miffed. The state auditor has a fraud hotline. And when somebody calls that hotline, it's anonymous.
Right.
And even if the allegations prove not to be true, they can be, because people use it as a weapon. I know they do, because, well, frankly, we've had it used against us, which it was just malicious is all it was. But when you IPRA that, even if the allegations prove not to be true, they redact the names of the complainant. And I have a real issue with that, because and in fairness, at a municipal league meeting, I did call out our current state auditor and told him I thought that was a dangerous practice, and I still feel that way. We had a situation several years ago where that happened to us, and I'm reasonably sure I know who did it. But we have yet to get those names. And it was interesting because you said you were a former assistant attorney general, and I actually have a letter from a former assistant, or an opinion from a former assistant attorney general that says that their opinion is that they should not be redacted. But the attorney general, of course, never followed through with it. And so I'm trying to figure out, I think that is so wrong, because anybody can call and make a complaint. And it's still damaging. I mean, there was absolutely zero truth to it. But nonetheless, my name, for instance, will forever be on a complaint at the state auditor's office. Do you see what I mean? And I'm like, I don't understand how every other state agency, they have to disclose those names. They can't redact that, but somehow the state auditor's office, they can. I understand their premise of why they want to do it, but it just seems to me like if the complaint proves to be false, that they should, do you know what I mean? So
Mayor, Commissioners, fully understand.
you can tell I'm really salty about this, right? I'm sorry, but it really is frustrating.
Fully
so.
understand what you're describing. And understand that either circumstances may be different, laws may be different. There is a catch-all under IPRA that has certain exclusions from public record. And in addition, there's the catch-all language that says as otherwise provided by law. And so there are circumstances, hotlines in some instances by law or by regulation, state regulation, that can protect disclosures, documents, redactions. Another example is CYFD. Has hotlines and complaint lines for the protection of children, and under many circumstances there are redactions and exclusions from that also. And the state of the law and the snapshot may be different in time. So there might have been a moment in time where, and I don't know specifically with the auditor's office and its hotline whether or not there was a regulation in place or whether a regulation is now in place that would protect that information. There are things in the statute about redactions, and certain protected information may be redacted. Certain records may be excluded. So let's say a personnel evaluation. That is a record that is protected from disclosure. However, let's say there might be a letter that as a record is publicly disclosable, but contents within that letter may be redacted under law. So just know that that's there. I'm not going to be able to give you a specific answer, but I can tell you I hear you and I understand. But
Because this was like,
different things.
I can't even tell you how many complaints. It was so ridiculous. It got to be laughable after a while. And it was very clear that these people were doing it as retaliation because they were mad because they didn't like what we were doing at the time, even though we didn't have a choice. To me, I'm like, when you start using these things as a weapon, I get the adult protective services or because children are involved, and it's a life or death situation. I get that. But when you're just using it as a weapon, it just seems to me like we're going too far.
Sure. And I think that's also the importance of going to someone that's in charge of investigating that, to say, please fully investigate that, and I want the report to go along with the complaint, to say, here's the complaint, and here's the report that says we looked into it, and it was false. Because that then would be a public record, maybe subject to some of the redactions of the name, et cetera. But it would be the follow-up report that says we received the complaint, we investigated the
Right.
complaint, and the complaint was false or
Yeah.
not substantiated.
Yeah, yeah, and that's basically what happened. They gave us the complaint, they gave us what was said, they just didn't give us who said it, so.
Madam Mayor, I have a
Quick
question.
comment, too.
Yes.
Two questions, actually. Are the notebooks that the officers take their, is that correct? The notebook that they take their notes on, IPRA, if they transfer them to the electronic format?
Sure. So changing them from format to format isn't really going to change what the ultimate decision is. I'm going to refrain from giving direct legal advice, but I am going to say that IPRA has been amended very substantially as it relates to law enforcement records during a pending investigation. And so that will be a question for your city attorney to say, here's the request, here's the information that's responsive to that request. Is it protected from disclosure, or am I required to? And that will change on some very fine facts. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of the broadness, that IPRA is much better than it was 10 years ago as it relates to law enforcement records. It was a little vague, and the answers were more dictated by the courts than they were in the statute. So you had to go find case law. Now, the statute is a lot clearer, and an analysis of where whether or not certain law enforcement records are disclosable is better addressed in the statute.
And is that similar to when another law enforcement agency is doing an investigation, but our officers have body cams? If we release that, if that hinders their investigation or not?
Again, without getting specific, because it's a circumstance by circumstance, what I can tell you is certain times body cam video may be disclosable, certain times it may not be. It's going to be very circumstantial. The most important thing, and I talk about this here, use your legal counsel. Not only to build the IPRA process, help administer the legal process, but also to evaluate the requests, the law, and the responses. Because if we get it wrong, there are expenses involved. So I will give you a law enforcement example that I was involved with, in which a newspaper made an IPRA request for a certain file. And I asked the heads of the law enforcement agency to come to the city attorney's office, review the file together, and then decide what was produced. Now, best practices are we disclose how many documents we reviewed and how many were subject to protection or not protection. I reviewed 25 pages of documents, let's say. The records custodian responded, 25 pages were reviewed, and these 2 pages were the only ones that were subject to public inspection. We responded that way. Got a very angry response from a member of the media who said, oh no, I've got someone on the inside. That file is 200 pages, not 25 pages. So I called in the leadership and said, hey, they're saying it's 200. You only brought in 25. What occurred? Oh, we pre-reviewed it, and we decided that 175 wasn't subject to IPRA, and 25 was, and that's what we brought you. I appreciate that pre-review, but it's really the lawyer that needs to make the determination for the full 200 pages. And so that was the lesson learned for both of us of, hey, please provide us the full file, don't pre-screen it, and then we'll work with you. Because it's all confidential communications as attorney to the client law enforcement agency. So bring us the full files. And that goes across department. That can happen in any department. So someone else may screen it and say, oh, we thought these were the only relevant documents. No, bring us all the documents and let us determine what the law requires and what the law requires. Is that helpful? Thank you, City Manager.
I got a quick one on IPRA real quick, too.
Sure.
In the event, whether it's staff or elected officials, with social media as big as it is nowadays, if we're discussing city business on our private Facebook or Twitter or all of those are subject to IPRA as well, correct?
That's correct, and that gets back to my number one recommendation, because I run into this. As a governing body member, oftentimes someone will say, you know, it's just easier if you send it to my office email. That's what I check every day. Don't send it to my city email, send it to my office email. And I advise 100% against that, because that opens up the office email or the Gmail to inspection. And I've personally had to have an attorney, not an attorney, an IT specialist, sit next to someone, open up a governing body member, open up their Gmail account and conduct the data searches, right? And then they pull up all the family stuff and then those crazy ads and whatever else.
That goes for Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, or whatever, I don't know all the different,
All of the above. It can take any form. It can be a text, it can be
okay.
an instant message rather than a post, so
Okay.
a one-on-one conversation. The techniques that I use for employees and governing body members is you do that pivot for the public that doesn't understand that when they reach out to you on your personal email, that it makes it subject. As city attorney, as a city employee, people knew my private email and they would send me something. Hey, can you help with this, or can you look into that? And I would immediately forward it to my official email and respond from my official email. Thanks for your email to my personal email. I forwarded it to my
Yes.
to my official email, and I'm going to respond from there. And you can do the same with city meeting.
Or can you respond,
with social media?
can you respond back saying, hey, this is a private email, please send this to the appropriate one, and not even respond it, or is it better to send it to your,
You can do one of two things. You can respond immediately from your private, but CC your personal, because you want that email chain to jump onto the server, and now
Okay.
they only have to look at the server. You want to get it over to your official email as quickly as possible.
Okay.
So you can respond from your Gmail with the CC to your official, or you can forward it to your official and respond from your official.
okay, but we can't tell them, hey, this is a private email, please send it to the other email.
You can.
Okay.
But I recommend
'Cause-
CCing your official email.
Okay,
Because that one response off of your private email saying,
was all
hey,
that
you
it'll
sent
pull
it
up.
here.
I got you.
If you didn't share it with your official, someone's still going to have to search for that original email.
So what about I'm sorry, were you
Go ahead.
done? What about Messenger? Because what I get is I get people messaging me on my Facebook Messenger about city business, and what I typically do is respond back and say, I can't talk about city business on this page. Here's my city cell phone number, or you can message my mayor page.
That's a very good practice.
Okay.
That's a very good practice. It's not as flexible as email to be able to CC
Right.
your official page.
Yeah, I can't
But
CC
just
it.
pushing them over there. And if there's ever a search, that's exactly what's going to be seen is, I immediately tried to push them over.
Okay.
It goes
And then-
back to the small town that we're in. I've had the same cell number for 25 years, so they don't call me on my city cell. A lot of times they'll call me on my regular cell, or same thing with emails. A lot of us are business owners. They have our private emails. They also have our city emails. Sometimes stuff gets sent to the wrong one, and then it creates issues. So,
Sure. Emails and instant messages are the easiest to control. Texts are a little bit harder. Just be aware that an IPRA could get to texts on a private phone. And it's not the end of the world if it does.
That's
But
what
just
I'm
know-
thinking.
happens.
So,
It happens.
so to be clear, though, it's not necessarily, okay, how do I put this? So it's not necessarily illegal to talk city business on a private phone. It just opens your phone up, right?
Correct.
It's not necessarily illegal to talk city business on a private email. It just opens your email up. So, which I don't care, because I don't care. Whatever, it doesn't matter to me. But the question then is, okay, so let's say you did talk, okay, I'll give you a great example. So when I was a commissioner, if we wanted a commissioner phone, we had to pay for it. And I'm like, I'm not paying for a commissioner phone. I'm not going to do that. They don't pay me enough for that. So I did use my phone, and I made it clear. And I was just like, if you want to look at my phone, go right ahead, because I'm not trying to hide anything. So my question is, though, let's say somebody said, well, she was talking about, I don't know, a situation at, I don't know, let's say the police department or something, right? And I'm saying, yeah, I did text. So when they go to look for that, they can only look for what pertains to what they're requesting, right?
Sure.
Right.
But a search, using search terms may capture more, and you may have to examine.
Yeah, and that's fine too, but like a text or something, if you're looking, it's only gonna, they have to, I guess what I'm saying is it's limited to whatever they're requesting. It's not like
Right.
they can look at all my,
Whatever
not look at
they're-
all my private stuff, but it's not like they can disclose all my private stuff.
Correct.
Right.
It's what they're requesting related to city business. So
Right.
I'll use grocery stores as an example. Please, I'm doing an IPRA for all communications by the mayor regarding the grand opening of the grocery store. Okay, city business. But you do a text search, and you might find texts that say, when you go to the grocery store, spouse, I'm pick up milk and oranges and whatever else, right? That might get captured in the search. Will that get produced over? No, because it's not city business.
Right.
But it might get captured
Right.
in the search.
And who cares?
And who can?
And who cares? Okay,
Right.
I got it.
As far as like commenting on posts and stuff on social media, I mean, that is, if it's pertaining to city business, is that subject to IPRA as well?
That is correct.
Okay.
If it's subject, and that's why you want to push people as much as possible into official accounts.
Okay.
So if they're going to your personal Instagram,
Mhm.
and you can push them to, hey, here's my city council Instagram, or please email me,
Mhm.
please call me, all of
We
these.
we have a lot of keyboard warriors in Alamogordo, and I'm sure they're everywhere, but, and we have it's called the Alamogordo City Watch page that's on Facebook. And a lot of times there's discussions about what we're doing right or wrong, or whatever it may be. And, if a staff member or elected official comments on that and starts getting into detail, then technically that is subject to IPRA, correct?
Well, it's their site that you're commenting on, but probably your account that you're commenting from, that's going to open it up
I gotcha.
to search.
Okay.
Yeah. So it can get complicated.
It can.
It
But I mean,
can-
if you make a public comment on a Facebook page, it's already public.
Right.
So what does it matter? It's
And-
already, it's not like you're trying to hide it, it's public.
We're getting a little outside the scope, but always be careful with social media, because
Right.
I've had governing body members go on someone else's Facebook page and say, hey, should we fire this particular employee? Right? Now you're opening yourself up to a whole
I'd
other
like to
legal
think we're all
risks.
smarter than that, but yeah, I
Yeah,
get it.
I only use the examples because they've occurred.
I get it, I get it.
Okay, so we're moving through that. Use your legal counsel, consult with them. Make sure your communications are always professional if they're city business. Folks that I call frequent flyers know they're talking about you every so often, or you're talking about them. So every so often, they'll do an IPRA request. Who's talking about me? How many emails are out there for me? And I've had emails be front page above the fold in the newspaper because the comments were very crass about a member of the public. So you've got to be careful about that.
I have a question related to that. Have there been any cases related to certain individuals who are deemed too excessive with their IPRA request to the point that it prevents the staff from actually doing their job?
So you have to show diligent progress towards answering them. There are very limited cases in which someone has been abusive enough to get a court order to suspend their ability to request, or actually that's in the context of IPRA lawsuits, not in the IPRA requests. But for the most part, there is not case law out there on abusive requests. There are diligent responses. So someone can request X number of documents, and you may need additional time, sometimes months. I've had a request in which the response, which was an appropriate response, was we will look at 1,000 pages per week for the next 36 months. But we don't have to drop everything and produce them to you tomorrow. So there are different ways to manage that, and your city attorney can assist with the diligent way.
And what about cost? I know some cities charge, especially if it involves paper copies, others don't. Is there a point where if there's a certain individual, they excessively request, so on and so on, the city has the right to say, look, we're happy to help you, but you're going to have to pay for the time?
So to answer your specific question, you're going to have to pay for the time. No. To bring up a common theme that I've talked about, everybody needs to be treated the same. You have the ability to charge up to $1 per page. AG tends to frown on the dollar itself. Some are up at $1, some are 50 cents, some are 25 cents, but that becomes a city policy that's uniform for every requester. The difficulty, and I have to have a lot of conversations about the unfunded mandate that IPRA is, it's 40 years unfunded now, so we need to plan for it at this point. But, and there are things in the law now about digital requests and digital formats, the ability for someone to come in and use a camera and photograph the record but not take the record home with them. That more often than not, pages don't get paid for. And that's just how the law is written about public disclosure. So be aware of that. In the unfunded mandate aspect, it will not be funded. And just governments need to be very in tune with their records custodian and their city attorney to understand what the patterns are for requests, what the expense is, and be able to budget and pay for that, because I will tell you, non-compliance is much more expensive than funding compliance. Okay. On the example that the mayor had earlier about there's no law against using personal equipment for public purposes, that's correct. The reverse isn't true, and we start touching on that in Governmental Conduct Act. Using city resources for personal benefit,
Of course.
political benefit, et cetera, those things are prohibited. And I'll run through all of these, but certainly, we say it because they've occurred. Taking official actions for cash in bags, frowned upon, actually illegal and a felony, right? So that's one way of using public resources for private gain, right? But another is, and people trip over this every so often, using a city truck to put a campaign sign in and drive around town. That's also not allowed under Governmental Conduct Act. I say it because it's happened. That's using public resources for private purposes. The same would be using city email to say, please come to a fundraiser for this charity or for this political event or something of that sort. That's when you go to your private email and you use that for the private fundraisers and political stuff. So I'm going to start. I've already promised I'd speed up, but we've got a lot of questions. So this is actually a very good and well-engaged conversation. But I am almost at my hour and a half max. So general rules for public officers, employees, and employees. So this applies to all the employees in the room also. The Governmental Conduct Act says, treat your position as a public trust, use the powers and resources only to advance public interest, not to obtain personal benefits or pursue private interests. And you can get tripped up in here, right? Someone saying, whether it's from a governing body member all the way through employees, to say, oh, you want me to engage in this activity? I'm going to need cash in bags, like the example I said earlier, right? Governmental conduct is going to cover top to bottom the governing body and employees. So conduct yourselves in a manner that justifies the confidence placed in you by the people, by the taxpayer, the pay our salaries. Full disclosure of real or potential conflict shall be the guiding principle. So most folks think, and most ethics ordinances say if you have a conflict, disclose it. Governmental Conduct Act says real or potential conflicts. So it may be perceived as a conflict, but not legally. Be on the safe side, disclose it. And make reasonable efforts to avoid undue influence and abuse of office. Again, because this law is out there, you want to stay away from that perception so that there aren't complaints with the AG's office on that. The biggest issue that I cover in the Governmental Conduct Act, because people trip on this the most, is prohibited political activities. No coercion by governing body members to contribute, vote, or participate in political activity. No threats to deny promotion or pay increase based on political activities. No requiring employees to contribute, make contributions, or to participate in political events. And no advising an employee to take part in a political activity. No use of governmental property for non-authorized purposes, which is political activity is one of those. And remember, again, be careful, be careful, be careful, because it's not always what we intend by our words, but it can be the perception or how someone receives the request. Hey, I'd love to see you Saturday at my fundraiser. Might be because you've known the person 20 years or you knew their parents or something of that sort, but how the person perceives it on the other is, might be, wow, my job's in jeopardy if I don't show up at that political event, I better do that, right? So be wary of that. The official acts for personal financial interest. Yes, I'm cartoonish when I talk about cash in bags. Has it happened? Yes. But other things where, contractors working with contractors, oh, I'll approve your contract if you go build an addition on my house for free. That's also happened. Things like that can be fourth degree felonies. So please be wary of that. Please be aware of that. And know that as a public officer or employee, you're disqualified from engaging in any official act that directly affects your financial interest. So for a governing body, that best example is, if I vote on this particular contract, it's going to personally benefit me. Number one, you've got to make that disclosure in the public setting, and you've got to refrain from participation.
And that would include family members as well, right?
It would. And under the Governmental Conduct Act, there's a realm of family members, which is typically spouses, siblings, parents, and in-laws of each. Okay.
Quick question on that one, too.
Yeah.
In the past, we had a commissioner that worked for a gentleman that has a contract with the city. When he voted to approve the budget, since that contract was kind of included in that, would that have been a violation? Or would it just him, because he always abstained when we voted on the contract,
Sure.
but he would vote on, and I'm just for clarification, I mean, I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, but,
Sure.
but when we voted on the budget to approve for the year, would that technically be a violation since that's funding that contract?
Again, I'm going to refrain from specific legal advice on specific instances, but what I can say is the budget generally is not the selection of the contractor.
Okay, it'd be at the actual approval of the contract is where,
That is where it's most directly going to
okay.
affect someone's.
And he always
interest.
abstained at that point. It's just, I didn't know how broad that would be, you know.
Right.
A lot of us are in business and there are times we may bid on a project, but we just abstain from voting when that project, if it's awarded to whoever we bid on or bid with.
Sure.
So,
And there are procurement ways, there are procurement exceptions to a lot of this that I'm not really going over today.
okay.
So that's not problematic. Seems like you guys are in compliance on that, but it's going to be the more direct action,
Okay.
the actual effect on you. The approval of the budget to pave roads
Mhm.
is something that you as a governing body participate in, that's your chief duty. But when it gets down to, excuse me, where the rubber hits the road, to the contractor itself, then that's going to be heightened scrutiny at that point. Okay. So be aware again that AGs and DAs can enforce this. There can be civil penalties and fines. There are other things that we can get tripped up on, like honoraria. Often, even as employees, we're called, definitely as governing body members, we are called to come give speeches or give an update on the municipality and everything that's going on. We're invited to luncheons. The provision of food, that's fine, but they can't pay you to be there. I just got a question recently about a conference where a local foundation was paying for attendance of a conference that was significant training for an employee. The ability to have the trip paid for and other things, of course you want to go through the appropriate approval process. Those things are all okay, but you can't be paid to be present. We're giving you a $5,000 stipend if you come to Chamber of Commerce next week. No, but can you provide me with chicken at lunch? Yes. Chicken and iced tea at lunch? Yes. Can you reimburse my mileage? Yes, but you can't pay for my attendance. So we've talked about enforcement. The best practices here: avoid conflicts and improper interactions with employees. On this bullet point, I do want to pause, and I'm going to get off topic because many of our communities face this. I know I'm talking about Governmental Conduct Act, but keep in mind other legal violations, such as discrimination, harassment, etc. This is sort of where I bring in sexual harassment concepts of you've got to be on your toes at all times with regard to your interactions with employees, whether it's they feel pressured under governmental conduct contexts or pressured under other laws. And again, it's oftentimes not the intent of a comment, but it is how it is received and perceived. And so you've got to be incredibly mindful because there is a heightened sensitivity with regard to discrimination issues, whether that's on ethnicity, race, gender, and religion, all of the other exclusions or other protected discrimination aspects. You've got to be mindful of that. And again, that people can receive something as a comment, whether it's a comment about appearance or other comments that might be playful in nature, that can fall within, they can be, you think are playful in nature for an employee and the receiver of that information, it can be a whole different experience. And so be incredibly mindful of that. Back to Governmental Conduct Act, abstain from decisions affecting personal financial interests. Be careful with the political campaigns. Be incredibly cautious with those. And public disclosure of financial interests, you're making them, but you may not always think about other conflicts you may have. Some are personal, some are on nonprofit boards that you serve on, or memberships that you're involved with. And some entities through their ethics ordinance will have gift reporting required if it's over a certain threshold, that it's got to be reported and publicly posted for the public to be aware of that. So things to think of. You have a City Commission Code of Conduct. This is where I'll speed up again. Be aware that it's there. It mirrors the Governmental Conduct Act, but it's also different in other ways. So be familiar with it. I've put some detail in here, but it's very important maybe just pull out the Governmental Conduct Code of Conduct, have it in your governance binders so that you're always aware that it's there. You've got to maintain the public trust, avoid conduct creating the appearance of impropriety. No financial interest in city business if a person's in a decision-making capacity regarding that interest. you've got disclosure requirements, you're disqualified from participating in debate, decision, or vote. I'm going to give an example on this one. I watched it, I was in the room. I had a governing body member get up and say, with regard to this issue, I have a personal conflict. I am abstaining from the vote. But I encourage every one of you to vote in favor of it.
Okay.
And the person stood up, walked to the front row, and mad dogged everybody while they voted. And of course, they voted in favor. That would be a violation not only of the Code of Conduct, but also that would be a violation of the Governmental Conduct Act. So, yes, the howls, because it's silly, it occurred. I watched it happen.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Interestingly, your Code of Conduct also takes the opposite approach. You can't vote in favor of certain things. You also can't vote to prejudice or hinder or punish enemies or opponents. That's language out of the code. So you can't intentionally act to favor yourself and intentionally act to retaliate against others. Disclose conflicts of interest, may not solicit gifts, personal benefits, favors, etc. Do not misuse confidential, non-public information, or attempt to, go knock on the door of staff. Hey, can you give me some info that I can then use for my personal monetary benefit? And no misuse of city property and resources for private gain or personal advantage. We've talked about that before, but the code does raise certain rental exemptions that you might be able to rent on the same terms of everyone else in the public. So rent a place in the park to hold an event, etc. So there are some good and reasonable exceptions mentioned in there.
A quick question on that.
Yeah.
As far as like campaign contributions and that kind of stuff, I know it says in here we're not allowed to solicit them, but if there's an item that comes before us where a particular individual has contributed to his or her campaign, should we abstain from a vote on those items if it's a substantial amount of money?
So, Mayor, Commissioner, let me ask this question. Do you have campaign contribution limits at this?
I don't think, we don't fall under that because we're nonpartisan, but, and I can't remember if there is I thought there was a dollar amount.
I don't think so. We don't even have to report to the state.
Yeah, we
so.
don't report to the Secretary of State or anything. We do self-report to the city. The clerk has access. We
But
do
that's a local ordinance.
Yeah, that's only local though, but just in the event that somebody gives you a very large donation and you come in and vote on a road or a building or whatever it may be, is that crossing the line or is that, I mean, it appears to be.
That's an interesting one. So real or potential conflict, I think there's going to be a threshold, and I can't tell you what that number is.
The dollar amount?
In which that's a potential conflict, where it becomes real or perceived conflict is the wording. So perceived, there might be a point to say, I'm making this disclosure, I either do or don't feel there's a conflict here, and I'm going to vote or I'm not going to vote. The reason I asked the contribution limit question is because I have seen where a city used to have disclosure requirements for large contributions, but then they limited the contributions to, I think, 1,000 for council, and I don't remember, it's 2,500 or 5,000, and therefore they made it sort of uniform and it took away the conflict because because the limits were lower. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just exploring the question.
So as long as it remains under that dollar threshold, then it's okay.
Right.
For us.
And they're also disclosed again in the reporting. That's a hard question, but I do think
It's a gray area,
that
I
at
think.
some point
Yeah.
you may wish to disclose because because the numbers may be sufficiently
Yeah,
large. that-
we do, any candidate has to, we file, I think there's 3 or 4 reports each election disclosing, real property and then in kind, even if somebody just donates signs to you or any of that kind of stuff, we report that to the city clerk's office, so.
Right.
But I just
So-
didn't know if there
so
was a
you do have
dollar
that
threshold.
reporting already,
Mhm.
and it's going to be a personal decision whether you disclose, whether you find it that it's a
Okay.
real or perceived conflict, and the disclosures necessary and stepping out, abstaining may
Okay.
be
Is that dollar amount might be in state law where we could have the attorney research that?
I'm not aware of any dollar amount in state law.
Okay.
But there may be some things for the attorney. Again, to turn some advanced questioning of the attorney might be appropriate to come in and say, hey, there's an agenda item next week that I'm looking at, and in this attorney-client communication, I'm going to disclose some things, and what are your thoughts about Criminal Conduct Act compliance?
Thank you.
And just know that those things are enforced by city ethics, by your city ethics panel, and that there are civil fines of up to $500. There's the potential of censure for not complying, and there's criminal referral. Your ordinance doesn't automatically engage a city prosecutor or anything of that sort, but the ethics panel may make criminal referrals to a district attorney. So know that that's out there. After thinking about this and turning in this presentation a week ago, I probably should have put this up higher. This is just a reminder for all my governing bodies. Remember, the city, this is from your charter, but every city has a similar version. City manager shall employ and discharge the employees of the city. This is the hardest part in all of this, in the context of Open Meetings Act, in your correspondence in IPRA, and in complying with ethics, is sort of everyone's in their lane. Remember that the governing body has a limited number of employees. Sometimes that's only the city manager, sometimes that's a city manager, a city clerk, and a city attorney. But there are limited numbers of employees, and every other employee falls under the city manager. That's very important to remember and to stay within the lane, so that if there are things that you're getting feedback from the community, that's routing it to the city manager for the city manager's handling. And I'm just talking about both positive and negative. You're going to filter that in, and that's also a bit of a reminder for even actions in the chambers of directing, you're making directives to the city manager for the city manager to implement through the employees. I'm going to give you a funny example of a governing body member running into a facilities manager at Home Depot, and the governing body member said, hey, there are too many keys out on the gym. I think that should be rekeyed. It was as simple as that. Not more complicated than that. But that facilities manager that week went and rekeyed the entire building because they took it as a directive from the governing body member. And remember, the governing body speaks with one voice through a vote to give directives. And what that manager didn't know, the facilities manager didn't know, was that the city manager was working on a contract for a new key system for not only the gym but the rest of the facilities, and they spent twice the money by rekeying it once to only have it be electronically keyed a month later. So be aware of how the governing body is perceived by employees, that sometimes they may take it as a directive and not realize the governing body, again, speaks with one voice through a vote, and their directives to the city manager that are then carried out through the employees. So please be mindful of that in the context of everything we've talked about. I apologize that I went 15 minutes beyond
You're
my
going to go
expectation.
16 because I have one more question.
Okay.
What is the difference between the Governmental Conduct Act going to the Attorney General for investigation, or the district attorney or whatever, and the new ethics panel, or the new ethics commission?
I've thought about that on my, probably the last half hour of my drive down here. And know that you are subject to ethics complaints before the Ethics Commission. Municipalities and city commissioners or councilors there can be a complaint that goes to them, and we're actually handling one for a state official. It gets referred to the Ethics Commission, and then there's an ethics inquiry. I should be a little bit more up to speed on whether, I know the Governmental Conduct Act complaints are going to them. I just don't know the exact mechanism. If
Okay.
they are the first receiver of any complaint under.
The ethics commission is.
The Ethics
Yeah.
Commission has the jurisdiction to review complaints that come to them relating to the Governmental Conduct Act. They're not a prosecutorial entity,
Okay,
so their decision may end up as a referral to a DA or the Attorney General.
okay, okay.
But as the statute remains right now, there is the ability for the AG or DA to step in even before an Ethics Commission.
Okay, so
decision.
that's two
So there's some
separate-
overlap.
There is some overlap, because
Yeah.
my understanding, and I guess I probably understood it wrong, was that they sort of replaced the AG's handling of the Governmental Conduct Act, but that's not necessarily true.
It's not necessarily
Okay.
true, because there may be criminal activity under the Governmental Conduct Act that
Mm-hmm.
will need to be handled by a prosecutor, which would be the AG's office or the DA's.
Okay, and that
office.
would make sense if you were stealing money or taking bribes or something like that.
Right.
Then it would be a criminal act. So I guess the Ethics Commission would probably be a lesser,
It's more of a civil process.
more of a civil
They
process.
do the
Okay.
investigation. It's more of a back and forth process
Mm-hmm.
in that they receive a complaint, they forward the complaint. Let's say it's a city commissioner against a city commissioner.
Mhm.
They forward the complaint to the city commissioner for response by the city commissioner. And sometimes that's through council. And then the response goes to the Ethics Commission. The Ethics Commission might ask for a hearing, might do further investigation, and then they actually issue an opinion on the validity of the
Okay.
complaint.
Or
So-
whether it should be moved on or just a fine or whatever.
Right.
Right, okay,
Right.
okay.
So, it's-
Because
that's
I've been kind of watching that, and so I've been seeing where they've actually taken some action, and I found it sort of interesting, because I just didn't, I mean, at first it was like, is this really legit? Like, you know what I mean? Because it's supposed to be a bipartisan commission. But yeah, they've taken some action against,
They have.
government
And
employees, so-
Their opinions can be very strong.
yeah.
I've skimmed their last 3 years of opinions, mainly by title, and then gone into the subject matter. And yes, they are very clear cut. Is this a violation? Yes. Or is this a violation? No.
Okay,
They also issue advisory opinions, and that is something to think about as a governing body, where you get to an issue, or a governing body member, where you get to an issue and say, wow, I want to make sure I'm in compliance. Let me ask for an advisory opinion. They don't
Okay.
always issue one, but they might.
They
And so
might.
they have a series of advisory opinions out there.
because
to help
there are
guidance.
attorneys on that commission, right? Isn't it made up of?
There are.
Mhm.
I don't know the exact makeup of how many required attorneys are on there, but I know the members, and I know that several of them are attorneys.
Okay, okay.
And there are public and at-large members.
Okay. And then the last thing, and I promise this is it, but this is good information. I think it's been helpful. I even see our probate judge is still here, so I'm sure it's helpful for you as well. But the last thing is, I call them Google lawyers. They can get their degree in, I don't know, 5 minutes, an hour, 10 minutes, whatever. But I always err on the side of, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not going to pretend to be one. I don't play one anywhere, that kind of thing. And so I always err on the side of, we need to get, so if we have a question about something, instead of an assumption, we need to make sure our attorney is involved. And is that,
I My general advice is if an attorney is making an inquiry, an attorney on behalf of the governing body should be involved.
Okay,
That is correct. Every time an attorney is referenced, sometimes somebody will walk in and say, former employee, current employee, member of the public will walk in and say, well, I've talked to my lawyer and that's a timeout. If you've
yeah,
engaged-
no, I get that, yeah.
If you've engaged an attorney, we can't continue to
Right.
communicate. We're going to need to have our attorney contact your attorney. So there are some protections there that yes, you should engage your attorney if
Okay.
attorneys
Okay,
are
but if
requested.
we're just talking, let's say, an executive session, and let's say one of us just doesn't feel comfortable, or we're not sure that we're doing something right, I mean, it's appropriate to just have our attorney there, or to request that she stay, or something like that.
That's a good point. I've got a detailed Open Meetings Act class that goes 2 hours just on Open Meetings Act. One thing to remember as a governing body, executive sessions are your privilege. It's the governing body's privilege only, meaning anyone else is an invitee into executive session.
Okay,
And sometimes that's the attorney, sometimes that's a city manager. It can be long-standing practice that every executive session, the attorney and manager are there. That's correct, but by law, they're not required to be included,
right,
but they're included as your invitee. Sometimes that'll be a department director or an employee come in to explain, maybe there's a lawsuit and it alleges something certain, and you say, hey, did this actually occur?
okay.
So,
So it's not inappropriate to do that?
no, it's not inappropriate.
Okay.
That's within the realm. You can invite the city attorney at any
I
point.
gotcha, okay.
A
very
quick
good.
question on that too. In the, before this ethics panel was set up, typically, and I just know from past experiences, if we had a potential violation of the Governmental Conduct Act, we actually would self-report to the Secretary of State's office, and then they would make a determination of whether it was or it wasn't. And then, certain things, if you voted on something that you may have had a conflict in or whatever, you could just disclose that in a meeting.
Right.
At the next regular meeting or whatever, and that would cure it. Is that the case now? If you have violations, does it go to the Secretary of State, or does it go to this ethic panel?
So, again, when you do something 29 years and you've been dealing with stuff a long time, there are old ideas that have been updated. I believe, without specifically researching it, that the Ethics Commission is now taking that place in the process.
So if
Where
we
there's the
self-report.
reporting,
Okay.
and sometimes the reporting is in the form of a request for an advisory opinion. We engaged in the following activity. Is this in compliance with with the Governmental Conduct Act? If it's not, what do we do?
Okay.
Type of deal.
So they're basically taking the Secretary of State out of the middle of it, because they were the ones that had the authority over the elected officials, whether it's county commission, city
Previously.
commission,
Yeah.
State reps, whatever.
Right. I'm
As far as the election, was this, and this, you may not know this or not, but the ethics panel, I know it was set up by the the legislature, but was it designed or written by a specific legislator,
I don't think so.
like the local election act was?
I think that the ethics panel was a long time coming.
Okay,
I don't think that's anything overnight, and I don't think that's to anyone specific.
okay,
There may have been people leading that charge, but I think the evolution of having an ethics panel like what exists is a best practice that the state had been looking at for years prior to that. Again, I can't, on the evolution of it, I'm going to have to go back and really look for more specifics.
yeah, the governmental conduct, I know it went into effect for city and local governments on July 1 of 2011. And it was a little bit further back than what you were thinking, but I just know because of an issue back then at that time, so. Prior to July 1, it didn't cover local government. It only covered from county commission on up. And then that's when they adopted it and added us in, but
And school districts were pulled in. at
school
a
districts as
specific
well.
time,
Yes,
too.
sir. Yes, sir.
But the details of the transition from the old system and the Secretary of State to the new
To this
system with the Ethics Commission included. I am going to have to go back and do just
Okay.
a little bit more work.
But in the event something were to happen and we self-report, we send to them rather than the Secretary of State?
That's what it appears to be. Again, I just read a series of
Okay.
their opinions, and it appears that the
And
first
then
stop is the
They'll do
Ethics
a
Commission.
determination of whether, yeah, it is a violation, no, it's not, and then make a recommendation of which direction that we need to head or what to do to fix it.
Or maybe even decline to opine.
Okay,
So it's that full range is what I've seen through their advisory opinion.
okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just curious. How many times in your 29 years have you, or since you've been doing this, have you seen the local DA, other than something outrageous, like they're, funneling funds or they're stealing or something, but just, how many times do you actually, because I'm curious about that. I just can't see our DA doing that, so I don't
It's
know.
typically the Attorney General's office.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And some may be because it's the Attorney General's office that feels the need to enforce, and they have more resources to do that. I would say it is also possible that a local DA may feel a conflict, and
That's what I'm thinking.
refer it to the
Yeah.
AG's office. So I
Okay.
think there are two reasons why it's more
Right.
frequently the AG's
Yeah, and that's
office.
what I'm thinking. It wasn't necessarily like, just,
Sure.
I'm just thinking they're busy, they're, they got criminal cases, other criminal cases, and so I just wondered how
Right.
often you saw
That
that. Okay,
potential is there, but you don't see
Sure.
it very often from the DA's office.
so it would typically be the Attorney General's office.
That's right.
And do you see that quite often?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
You see it very frequently, enforcement of all of the above, IPRA, OMA, and Governmental Conduct Act. I have seen some severe consequences for failure to comply with the Open Meetings Act. The rolling quorums, the backroom deals, stuff like that. I've seen severe AG intervention.
Okay.
So thank you. I know this was long, and to the staff, you've been incredibly patient being here and taking part in this.
It was a little informative though, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah. And it helps the staff.
You don't have to say that just for me. I don't want to get in any trouble or anything, but I thought it was, you see what I did there, right? Yeah. I thought it was pretty informative, so.
And I have spoken with your city attorney to just let her know I'm available as a resource and a sounding board. Do I have all answers? Please ask my wife. She will definitely say, no, I don't know all the answers. But that said, I'm available as a resource to spitball and interconnect city attorneys throughout the state to share information and best practices.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming down and sharing this information with us. I really do think it was good information, and I think we can all use it. Unfortunately, when you're elected, especially to a city office, it doesn't necessarily come with a how to be a commissioner manual, so sometimes it's learning on the fly, so it certainly helps.
I do want to commend the commission, the mayor, and the city manager and city attorney for being proactive. I'm here because everyone felt, this is good information to provide to the commission. So I do want to commend you for being proactive and for engaging the staff, because it's very important for the staff to hear this training also.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay. Well, he jumped up in a hurry, didn't he? Way to go, Glidden. He's like, I got a family at home and I'm leaving.
Well, wait, hold up.
Staff.
Ooh, hold on. I was going to do this in my city manager's report, but there's a lot of our managers that you guys may not know. So I know that Shane, wave Shane. He's our airport manager.
Oh,
Brand
hello,
new.
welcome to the
Not
city.
even here a week. Hector, community affairs. Eileen Flint, this is our new tourism
Her, I
person.
know.
Eddie, I don't know if everybody knows Eddie. He's back there somewhere. I saw him. Say hi, Eddie.
What does Eddie do?
Eddie Streets.
Streets?
Yes.
I wondered.
Yes, Patrick, say hi, Riley. I don't know if you've met him. He was in Bob Johnson's, he's the
Oh,
project
okay.
manager. He's kind of taking over right now for him. Daryl, does everybody know Daryl? Is he here? No. Anybody else, guys? Oh, there he is. Say hi, Daryl.
Hey, Daryl, how's it going? Yeah.
Oh, Michael Bradley, yes. Our new golf
Oh,
course
where?
superintendent. Say hi.
Commissioner Wright, pay attention over there.
We know who to call.
Commissioner Burnett, pay
Give them your
attention.
phone number.
Anybody else, any golfers?
Aaron
out there?
Foster, I don't know if everybody knows Aaron. Say hello. He works with Dave. Anybody else, guys? Jim, say hi. Landfill. Anybody else? Oh, and then, of course, I'm not sure if you know him, but Toby is here. Toby, stand up. Just because I like putting him on the spot. And that's it, okay?
I mean, you know.
I
well,
think that's it.
Thank you guys for being here. I know that was long. I do really believe it was good information, especially for our new employees. You may never worked for a municipality before, I don't know, but it's always good to have a refresher. And welcome to the city of Alamogordo. We are so glad to have you. Thank you. I know somebody's probably glad to have a golf course superintendent, not mentioning any names or anything, but anyway, so thank you. Thank you guys for being here. I think you can go now. I'm
Okay,
so
you guys can go
sorry.
now.
I'm so sorry. Have a good night. Remember us
Thank you,
people.
everyone.
Remember us little people who are stuck here.
And then that's Cord. Ashley's husband.
We've met. We have met, yes. Okay, so now, is everybody good to keep going? We're all good? Okay, very good. All right, we're going to move on to, was that your report? Yeah, could you give us that nice, big, comprehensive report every week, so you don't have anything to say, right? Got it, okay. All right, so we're going to move on to remarks and inquiries by the city commission. Does anybody have anything?
Two quick
Commissioner
ones.
Reardon?
I noticed on here, item 4, why are we approving your weekly reports? Just a quick question, so.
Because there's a lot of work that goes into it, and I figured might as well be part of the public record. I know it's part of the open records, but might as well be part of the public record. And there's a lot of times people are like, what does staff do all day? What does the city do all day? Well, at least it's on the record that we do a lot every week.
And then, I don't know if anybody, Commissioner Wright may have, or Mayor Pro Tem Wright may have noticed this, but out on a south overpass, they've put in these purple streetlights. And I was just kind of wondering why. It's just on there. I didn't know if we could get with P&M and ask them.
I don't think, if I remember correctly, and I talked to,
I think we got an email about that.
I can't remember
saying
who,
they sent the wrong
but I think there's a
bulbs or something.
default in them. I don't think they're purple. Are they the streetlights?
No, they're-
I think we got an email possibly saying they sent the wrong bulbs
Yeah.
or something and they
It's
stuck.
just the overpass.
Yeah.
Once you get down to the bottom of the hill, it turns back to regular, and the other way it's regular.
There was some on White Sands too. I don't know if those have been
Okay.
replaced.
I was wondering, because they don't throw very much light, and they're kind of
Yeah.
like weird looking when you go through there, so.
Yeah,
It's like black lights or something.
It is, yeah. So I just didn't know if we could, I'll look back through my email and see if I see anything. So,
yeah, I'll ask Bruce about it.
All right. And then one more, sorry. White Sands Boulevard down there, right in front of the zoo and Chamber of Commerce building. I've asked about them before. We were supposed to get with DOT, NMDOT out here, about those ridges. It's mainly in the northbound lane that you notice them.
We submitted, I think last time you brought this up, I know that we submitted a complaint or inquiry to DOT.
Okay.
We haven't gotten a response back.
It would be so, if they could just run in there with a milling machine and mill those down, it would be really nice. One of them I know they've looked at because there's a pile of asphalt in front of it to make a little ramp over it. So I know they've addressed it, but it's pretty bad right there, just between like 10th and Indian Wells right there in that area.
We can resubmit another one.
Okay, yeah, the guy's name's Aaron that runs the DOT
Yeah,
out there now,
yeah.
so. But that's all I had.
Anybody else?
Well, I just wanted to mention on last Thursday, the White Sands Rotary Club actually gave me an award for becoming
saw
the
that.
Professional Person of the Year. So I want to thank them for that award. I said I was placed in the, I guess, the selection, and then, of course, it was finally awarded to me. Not like, there's so many people in the city of Alamogordo that are doing things, and so I felt very honored to have gotten the award, but also I brought it to the city because I had a lot of help over the last 3 years getting the cleanup together. So I told Stephanie, I said that I think it is a community award. So even though it was presented to me, I wanted to say to the city, thank you, because nobody works alone, and you need all the help you can get. So thank you.
One more quick one. It's been a couple of weeks since it's been out there, but it was in the obituary, I believe, last Sunday, the passing of John Seacrest. He was pretty prominent in the community, been here a long, long time. I just wanted to note that to everybody. I don't know if everybody knew who he was,
Good.
but he passed away in a car accident a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So I've had a pretty busy few weeks. We all have. But just so you know what we're doing, we did meet with the DA's office to sort of discuss their take on our officer's death, and got some good information there. I had a meeting with Senator Burt for the same reasons. Oh, Lord. I met on Tuesday. I think Commissioner Paul was there also. We went out to the base. The Undersecretary of Defense was there. We talked about housing issues and got an opportunity to talk with them. We had on last Wednesday, we had the ribbon cutting for the scenic extension. That was very exciting. If you haven't had a chance to try that road out, I'm getting calls all the time from people that are just thrilled that that's open. So, and I'm thrilled it's open because maybe they'll quit calling me and asking me about it. I'm just kidding. Anyway, yeah, so that happened, and I think that's all I've had for the last couple of weeks. I try to mention those things just so people know what's going on, know that we're busy and we're doing stuff. And I think that's it. I think that's all I've got. Unless, did I miss something? I don't think I missed anything, did I? Yeah, it's just been 2 weeks, so. Anyway, okay. Does anybody else have anything? Nope. Okay. We are going to move on to the consent agenda. So, does anybody have anything that they want to pull from the consent agenda? Anybody have any questions?
This one, number 5. I think it's number 5. Let me make sure. Yeah, number 5.
Okay,
I just want to pull it off for further discussion. So.
okay. Anybody, anything else? No? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9?
So moved.
Motion from Commissioner McDonald. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Mayor Pro Tem Wright. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Carl Melton,
Aye.
Nick Paul,
Aye.
Stephen Burnett,
Aye.
Josh Reardon,
Aye.
Sharon McDonald,
Aye.
Dusty Wright,
Aye.
Susan Payne.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. We're going to move on to item 5, removed from the consent agenda. And Commissioner Reardon, did you have some questions on
I
that?
just, we're given $1 million for this, and the building out there, I don't know if it's 600,000 or 800,000. What are we doing to secure the other couple $100,000 worth of the loan we're doing, or the
So they will put in the 400,000 in renovations. We're holding the mortgage on the building. We'll file the mortgage with the county.
Okay. Do we know the asking price of the building and how much the renovations are? I think it was, what, 600 and 400 is what it was at the last, when we talked about it?
I believe Michelle is in negotiations right now, and maybe she can answer better. Yeah.
Yes, please. Hello.
Mayor and Commissioners, Michelle Perry here. So yes, in regards to the building, I am currently in negotiations with the seller through the real estate agent. We have settled at a price of $615 after some very serious back and forth. However, we've had it inspected and lots of findings, lots of objections that I will be filing. That price is going to go south, or the owner will get those things fixed. So the inspection has been done today. The gas was turned back on. The gas meters had been pulled, and so we had to get those reinstalled and have the gas lines tested. And there's lots of plumbing fun stuff and electricity and HVAC and on and on and on. So that's where we're at right now.
Okay. In the event that you can't come to an agreement with that owner for that property, what are y'all's plan B?
We're going to look for another property.
Is this agreement tied to that specific piece of property?
The project participation agreement is, so we would have to come back to commission for approval on the building.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure the city's interest is protected. You know, it is, to the city, it's not that much money, but it is a lot of money. So I just want to make sure in the event something happens that we're protecting the taxpayers' money, so. But that's all I had questions on, so.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve item 5?
So moved.
A motion from Commissioner McDonald. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner Burnett. It was right? Okay, yeah. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Carl Melton,
Aye.
Nick Paul,
Aye.
Stephen Burnett,
Aye.
Josh Roden,
Aye.
Sharon McDonald,
Aye.
Dusty Wright,
Aye.
Susan Payne.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Good luck. I am looking forward to good things with this. This is exciting. All right, we're going to move on to new business. Item 10, consider and act upon resolution number 2023-37, adopting an infrastructure capital improvement plan and identifying the top 5 recommended capital outlay projects for fiscal year 25 through 29. And hello there. I look up and there you are. Look at that. It's like magic. Anyway.
Move along.
Yes.
So,
Debbie Osborne, our grant coordinator, has some information on that.
okay. Hi, Mayor Payne, Mayor Pro Tem Wright, Commissioners, and as Acting City Manager Hernandez. I'm presenting our fiscal year 2025 through 2029 Infrastructure Capital Outlay Plan. It's also known as the ICIP plan. The ICIP is a planning tool. It's used to establish priorities for anticipated capital improvement projects to help prevent emergency situations, and it is not a grant application. It covers a 5-year fiscal period, focusing on repair or replacement of existing infrastructure or the development of new infrastructure, and it encourages a more efficient city operation. It is developed, updated, and submitted annually to the New Mexico Department of Finance, Local Government Division, and can be found on their website. Listing a project on the ICIP list increases funding opportunities because many state, federal, and private funding agencies utilize a city's ICIP in reviewing grant applications. Additionally, a project must be on the ICIP list to be eligible for capital outlay funding. ICIP projects are not part of the city's annual budget. Various street maintenance projects, such as repairs and traffic lights, are included in the city's annual budget. Therefore, we do not list them on the ICIP. The city has its own long-term infrastructure planning project to help develop a street assessment to help prioritize streets for maintenance and improvement. This is explained in detail on the city's website. The developing the ICIP Department directors evaluate the needs of their departments. Then they meet with the city manager to discuss and select those highlighted in priority. We also reviewed the results of the citizen survey that was conducted by Consensus Planning for the development of Community Services Master Plan. The results of the Bonita Lake Campground Survey conducted in October of 2022, and comments and suggestions received by the public at a public meeting held on July 31st. Example of projects selected based on these results are zoo improvements, library improvements, construction of the natatorium, construction of a playground at Dudley School, and reconstruction of circulatory roads at Bonita Lake, and the development of fishing access and day use reopening, and a project to plan and design a community garden. Please let me know if you want me to read the comments aloud that we received at the meeting. I know you sent them to all of you. I could read them out loud if you want.
How many people showed up, just out of curiosity?
There were 5 members of the public, which is more actually than we've had in at least 7 years since I've been doing it.
That's good.
So it was good. And Commissioner McDonald was there, and Evelyn, and Ronnie, and Stephanie.
Belinda.
Linda was there. Oh, she's not here now. And, yep, that's it, right, I think? Yes. So it was actually attended well, considering how poorly it's usually attended. And I also received the comments that I shared with you via email. I
I
replied
saw
to
those.
each of them, forwarded them on to the appropriate department directors, and I can read them all out loud if you want.
I mean, we all got the email.
Yeah.
You all got the email, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I read 'em.
Anyone have any questions on any of them, or want to, anything? I also forwarded, I believe we had one gentleman who submitted suggestions that night on the forms that were distributed to the attendees. And also Commissioner McDonald had some suggestions on that, and Courtney McCary had some suggestions on that, which I included in the emails that I sent to you. I also have a list of all the ICIP projects that we used to apply for and were awarded capital outlay funding in the last 3 years. If you want me to read that list, it's pretty extensive. But I'm happy to read that, or I could email that to you and share it too. So either of those, anybody want tonight?
I have a question
Yes.
about the library north patio.
Yes.
And this might be more for you, Stephanie.
And actually, just so that you know, I am going to mention all 5 projects, and it may be answered then, but go ahead and ask now. if
Okay,
you'd
well,
like.
this is more, I know a decade ago, probably longer, we tried to build a new library where Albertsons is. Does this $125,000, does that kind of a indication that we're moving away from that and more opting towards upgrading the existing building?
I don't believe we've even had talks about doing a new library in the past, I don't know how many years. So we're just kind of renovating what we have and expanding it for more outdoor space.
Okay, it was a while ago. It was
This was quite a while ago.
Like 10, 12 years.
2008 or
It was,
something.
yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
That was back when there used to be an old grocery store that sat there.
Yeah,
And Albertsons purchased the property, tore the old building down, and built the building that's there now.
okay.
So, yeah, there's no chance of that ever transpiring anymore.
The only reason I asked is the library is one of our oldest buildings,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's not in the best shape.
Right.
And it's kind of small, so.
It's 20,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Back when they were trying to pass the bond, it was to double it to 40,000.
Can always be changed in the future, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah. No, I remember when all that was going on. Mhm. Anybody else have any questions?
Okay, just quickly, I wanted to say too, if anybody wants the links for either the complete listing of projects on DFA's website, the link to the street assessment and our infrastructure planning on the city's website, or the link to the information about consensus planning and their survey, I'm happy to send them to you if you want them. You can just send me an email asking me. Okay, the top 5 projects that we used for our capital outlay applications later this year are APD procurement of police department vehicles and equipment at $500,000. The reason for this is it's important to make sure that we provide the best vehicles we can for our public officers. The community, they also are driving several older vehicles that aren't always the best. Community services, the bear enclosure renovations and expansion at Alameda Park Zoo, that's $400,000. Currently, where the bears are, the water feature is not working. It's a small enclosure for a bear, so they would like to renovate and expand that. The community services construct and equip restroom at Alameda Park Zoo. This will be in the end of the zoo where there is not currently a restroom, so people have to go all the way back to the beginning if they need to use that. And it's something that the public has indicated they would like. Community services library north patio renovations. They'll be renovating this area to use it as an outdoor reading area. It also will be used for private access to be able to come in and use computers for telehealth conferences, which are increasingly being used. And Parks and Recreation, the Dudley School Playground, which is a really important project that a lot of community members would like to see happen. Those are the 5 that we would like approved to go on to recommend for our capital outlay applications this year. And that's it. Any questions or?
I got a quick
Yes.
question on that, the restroom for the
Yes.
zoo down there on the north end. I'd asked about that a few years ago. but,
Yes.
If we were to do that through like the Alamogordo Friends of the Zoo, I know there's some different guidelines that they would have to follow versus what we have to follow
Commissioner.
to potentially.
They don't have the Friends of the Zoo
Yeah,
anymore.
Apex
Oh, they
is
don't have
gone.
that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's gone? Okay. I'm just, that's a lot of money for the last
Well-
bathroom that we built was,
The last one we built at the
Balloon
Balloon Park
Park.
was $300,000.
yeah, and do you see the size of it?
Well, it'll be a unisex bathroom at the zoo also, because that's how much they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And additionally, when we submitted the application for the Balloon Park, that was for park restrooms. We were hoping to be able to do more than one at that time, but unfortunately,
the bid was for
when
2.
we got the estimates, it was prohibited to
Yeah.
do both at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's why we would like to apply for this one now.
Okay. And this is just through the capital outlay part of it?
Yes, that would be through capital outlay. Yeah, there's lots of other grant sources, like some public asked for animal control facility improvements. We've received many grants over the last 3 years. Actually, we received a new one for this current fiscal year from the Carol Petrie Foundation. They've been tremendously helpful in helping. They helped construct the drop-off center that can be used after hours, the new artificial turf in the back of the control building, along with the shade structures. They've been very supportive of our animal control facility applications. So some of the other projects on the list, we have other sources of funding.
To be able to do that.
FAA and the state also are usually the ones who would fund the airport projects that are listed. So, these are the ones that we would not find as many sources of funding other than capital outlay.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? All right, do I have a motion? Make sure I'm doing this right. Yes, a motion to approve item 10.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-37.
Okay.
I'll second.
And I have a motion from Commissioner Reardon, and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Wright. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Carl Melton,
Aye.
Nick Paul,
Aye.
Stephen Burnett,
Aye.
Josh Reardon,
Aye.
Sharon McDonald,
Aye.
Dusty Wright,
Aye.
Susan Payne.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. We're going to move on to item 11, appointments to boards and committees. We have, currently, there's one vacancy on the Mayor's Committee on Aging, 2 vacancies The Senior Volunteer Program Advisory Council, we have no applications for that. And then 3 current vacancies on the Airport Zoning Board. We have 1 application by a current member, Randall Wilson, and he's applying due to his upcoming term expiring. And if reappointed, this would be his 2nd term. I don't think he's here tonight. If nobody has any objections, I'm going to go ahead and reappoint him. Okay? And that is it. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn into executive session? In compliance with 10-15-1, to discuss limited personnel matters, the city manager.
So moved.
I have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Wright. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from
Go.
Commissioner McDonald. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Cara Melton,
Aye.
Nick Paul,
Aye.
Stephen Burnett,
Aye.
Josh Reardon,
Aye.
Sharon McDonald,
Aye.
Dusty Wright,
Aye.
Susan Payne.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. We are adjourned. Thank you.